This is the Rebound Rundown. I'm your host, Paul Fritschner. Your home for college basketball in the Cincinnati area and across the country every Monday through Friday during the season. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome into another episode of the Rebound Rundown. I'm your host, Paul Fritschner. This is a daily college basketball show during the season and a weekly show in the offseason, covering everything you need to know about your favorite team locally here in Cincinnati, whether it's Cincinnati, the Bearcats, Xavier, NKU, Wright State, Miami, Ohio State, Kentucky, Louisville, Dayton. I don't think I missed anybody. I think that covers all our bases here on the Rebound Rundown. And make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening to this right now, Apple, Spotify, any major podcast platform. If you're watching on YouTube, shout out to you. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Maybe you're watching on Fox 19. Head on over to our digital channels. You can follow us on social media at Rebound Rundown as well. We have a transfer portal tracker where we have everything that you need to know. Maybe you're just catching up on the portal. Every player that's gone in or out of a local program, we have it there on a Google Sheet all in one place. But we are recording still from our downtown studio in Over the Rhine. It is awesome to be here with Keegan Nickoson of Bearcat Journal. And Keegan, welcome to the studio. Let's talk some Bearcats here.
Absolutely. I'm excited.
Yeah, we have a lot to get to. Obviously, a coaching change and an entirely new team. So there's plenty to get to over the next 45 minutes or so here on the Rebound Rundown. But first, I want to make sure that I hit a couple of headlines. Malachi Moreno for Kentucky back, a major decision and a season-changing, defining decision for Malachi Moreno. Really changes the outlook of this Kentucky team heading into next season. If he had stayed in the NBA draft, they were going to look a whole lot different. This is a major win for Mark Pope to get Malachi Moreno back, somebody that could have potentially been taken pretty high in the NBA draft. For him to decide to want to come back to Kentucky is a huge deal. And Keegan, I know we're going to talk Bearcats here over the next 40 minutes, but you and I were talking right before we started about Milan Momcilovic and whether he was going to come back to college, maybe play at Kentucky, and what Kentucky might want to just do to get him on their roster. What a recruiting win that would be for him. Before we get to UC, any thoughts on a Wildcat?
Yeah, I mean, I have two close buddies who are big UK fans, and I was hanging out with one of them when the Malachi Moreno news broke, and he literally stopped everybody. He was like, "Hold on, everybody. Stop talking. Malachi Moreno's coming back." It's like it would have been really bad if he didn't.
Yeah.
So Big Blue Nation, very, very happy about that one, I can believe.
Absolutely. All right, let's get into the Bearcats. And before we get into the players and the roster and everything like that, I want to start with Jerrod Calhoun because, going back to the coaching search, it was pretty obvious that Jerrod Calhoun was going to be the guy at Cincinnati, but maybe you're watching or listening to this right now and you don't know a whole lot about him or why it was so obvious. He's a Cincinnati guy through and through. He'd been part of the program back a couple decades ago and now has found his way back to Cincinnati. I was at his introductory press conference, as were you, and it was, seeing Bob Huggins be there, and it felt like a full circle moment for the program to see so much history be involved in a coach and to have somebody back as part of the family. Feels like from the early impressions and returns over the last month or so since he's really taken the reins now and starting to settle in, that you can feel a lot of that. It's starting to emanate around the program.
Yeah, I mean, seeing Corey Blunt and Steve Logan at an intro presser is always a good sign. And everything I had heard about him is that he was just a basketball guy. And talk about a huge win for John Cunningham. I mean, he really, really needed it with the hire of Wes Miller. Didn't go well. Scott Satterfield, still to be proven, but kind of there are people that are down on it. This is a layup that he had to hit. He couldn't smoke this one. So it was a huge hire. And, I mean, grew up in Akron. I think he played against LeBron, is like really, really good friends with Rich Paul, LeBron's agent. And I think Rich Paul said the person who loves basketball as much as LeBron is Jerrod Calhoun. That's the only other person I've met that's close to it. He goes, it's a tie. So huge, huge win. Has won everywhere he's been. Left West Virginia as an assistant to take a Fairmont State job, a D2 job. Went to the Final Four there in 2017. And then took the Youngstown State job and really rebuilt that program into what they are now, a team who has a good basketball program. Goes to Utah State, makes 2 tournaments in 2 years, and then leaves for UC. So it's the perfect situation of a proven winner with Cincinnati and Ohio ties.
So let me ask you this. Have you been able to get to know Jerrod yet? Have you ever been able to kind of start building that relationship with him, and what's he been like if you have?
Yeah, we were able to connect in Memphis, and I actually wrote a feature story on him where I talked to some of his former colleagues and friends, and everything that I'd heard is that he's just this authentic guy who loves basketball. He just loves talking ball. And in the short times we've been able to chat, that's what I feel. Like, he loves watching the game, how he recruits, identifies talent, and he just seems like a genuine, authentic guy. Doesn't seem like he's above anybody. And everything that I'd heard from those guys about that story is that he kind of runs it like a democracy. Like, the student manager almost has as much say as the head coach. Like, he wants to hear from everybody's vantage point about how they think that the program can be made better. And I don't know if that was the case at Cincinnati over the past few years. So he seems like a great guy, and as we're going to talk about, got a huge recruiting win, and he's really hit the ground running as much as any other year one coach in the country so far.
What do you think his identity is as a coach? Because if you look at some of his teams, they've obviously been pretty offensive minded. In fact, it's pretty funny. I texted you back during the coaching search. I texted you back during the coaching search because at that point, I had been talking to some people around the sport and trying to figure out, was there anybody else on Cincinnati's radar?
Yeah.
Anybody, anywhere. And so I went to Bearcat Journal and I was reading your article of the hot board.
Yeah.
And you had listed pros and cons for a bunch of names. And, you kind of get to a point when you're writing and you're doing these hot boards where you have to list a few names, but probably a lot of them aren't going to end up being realistic candidates because they're going to end up somewhere else, whatever. But really, it was always Jerrod Calhoun. And the pros and cons, you listed one of the I wish I had it in front of me. A better podcaster would have had it in front of me that I could read the exact quote. But essentially, I'm paraphrasing. Essentially, what you said was that his offense is too dynamic. And I'm sitting there, I texted you and I said, is his worst trait also that he's a perfectionist? And then your response to me was, it was kind of funny, and it's true in that this UC program for decades has been defined by a gritty, tough defensive unit that'll win low-scoring games and grind you down. That is not what Jerrod Calhoun brings to the table.
Yeah, no. I mean, he is a offensive guy, and when you watched him against Villanova in the NCAA tournament and Arizona, even taking them to the final few minutes of that game, you just saw the cohesiveness with his roster offensively, with MJ Collins, Mason Falslev, Adeline Elamian, who's coming to Cincinnati. But I mean, I grew up on UC basketball. I saw the 44-42 win over Pitt in the Big East tournament. Like, that was something that actually happened. That's not an exaggeration.
Yeah.
So, and mark my words, there will be a board post on Bearcat Journal that says, I just wish his defense was better after they score like 88 points in a loss.
Lose 90-85.
Yes,
it'll be like, we got some defensive issues here.
That's going to be a board post.
Yeah.
So it'll be an adjustment for this fan base to realize what it's like to have a really capable offense, because it's been so few and far between a season where it's been a good offense. It's basically just been control the boards, play really tough, gritty defense. That was Mick Cronin's identity, but he kind of had those sufficient offenses at the very least. Wes Miller, really, really good defensive coach, but the offense was, I don't think, ever in the top 100 when he was at Cincinnati, which was his downfall. So it's going to be an adjustment, but I'm really confident what he's going to be able to do and how he's going to be able to make his players better. Yeah,
one of his assistant coaches, Eric Hout, who ended up taking the head coaching job at Tarleton State, I think there was a narrative around there. I had certainly talked about it because he was somebody who had really taken charge of their defense at Utah State. Now he goes and leaves, and obviously being with Jerrod for a couple of years, they had run some pretty similar principles to like what Mick Cronin had ran. Eric was at NKU and kind of had some familiarity here with the area and the system and some of those matchup zone type defenses. He's not going to be part of the staff anymore. Have you heard anything about how they're going to attack that side of the ball?
Yeah, it's kind of a shifting of guys who are on the offensive side of the ball at Utah State are going to kind of switch to defense. I can't remember the specific names of who's who. I think Johnny Hill and Mantoris Robinson might be on defense. And I think Mike Feuline, the Mountain Union coach who came in, is going to be on offense. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's some like combination of that. So it's not going to be really a defensive coordinator thing like it was with Eric Howard. It's going to be more of a combination. But I think I love the dynamic of him just saying, okay, you've succeeded on the offensive side of the ball, and now apply those principles to defense and see what happens. But yeah, it's going to be fun, and I think the amount of athleticism and length that they brought in, that's going to make a huge difference on the defensive end. So it's not just going to be that UC is a bad defensive team and a good offensive team, because when you look at it, last year you had a top 50 defense in Utah State, according to Ken Palm.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be huge.
All right, let's get into the major recruiting win that you just mentioned a few minutes ago. Kam Mercer reclasses to the class of 2027. Originally was a 2028 guy. Princeton High School, right up the road, and he keeps Jerrod Calhoun, keeps the talent home, and that's something that he has really stressed. You've seen a couple other pretty high-profile high school recruits that we can talk about too, that he's really, you always hear coaches say you want to put a fence around the state, right?
Yeah.
You want to keep those players home, and when you have so many Division I schools in this state or in this area, it's an important win for Jerrod Calhoun to get somebody like Kam Mercer to go right down the road to Clifton and to play for the Bearcats. How big of a recruiting win is this in general, and what kind of a player is Kam Mercer?
Yeah, I mean, in his introductory presser, Jerrod Calhoun said, Cincinnati is the best job in Ohio. And then he gets here, and 2 months in, he takes one of Ohio State's most prized recruits out of the 2028-2027 class. And when I talked to Kam about it, he said one of the biggest reasons that he chose Cincinnati was the belief that Calhoun had in him. And Kam wasn't really considering reclassing into 2027 until Calhoun said, I want you to commit here, and I want you to play in the 2027 class. I don't want you to play your senior year at Princeton. I want you to come here. And Kam had told me that Ohio State kind of talked about the idea, kind of considered it, but the amount of belief and conviction that Calhoun had about getting him to reclass is kind of what pushed him over the edge. And it helps that Kam's dad is a huge UC fan, and he's from Cincinnati. Yeah. And it's almost like it might have been a thing of, okay, I'm going to take this visit to UC. If there's a good package and Calhoun can kind of sell himself to me, I'll just go to UC. But I'm going to give a lot of credit to Calhoun and not fumbling that one and getting him to stay home. And you kind of talked about putting the fence up around Cincinnati. There has never in the modern era been a season where there's 3 top 100 recruits in the same class playing. So now with Kam Mercer reclassing in 2027, you have Kam, Josh Tyson at Lakota West, and then you have Isaiah McRussell at Winton Woods, who are all top 100 according to 247 Sports. So he came in at a perfect time to recruit the city and be able to get 3 guys who can really come in and contribute. And it's not just a thing of, okay, he's from Cincinnati, we're going to take him, and he can help maybe a little bit. These are 3 guys who can make a huge impact at some point.
Yeah, the other 2, have you heard anything more about their recruitment, kind of where they are?
Yeah, I would expect UC to go very, very heavy at Josh Tyson. I don't exactly know about Isaiah McRussell, but I know the staff loves Tyson a ton. They had Tyson and McRussell there for visits. And if I'm putting myself in Jerrod Calhoun's shoes and I'm saying, who do I want to prioritize, it would probably be Josh Tyson, just in terms of he's a very similar player to Kam Mercer. If you can get 2 players like that kind of combo guards, can handle it, can run the offense, and then play a really, really tough style of defense, those are the 2 guys that I would prioritize. But Isaiah McRussell, really, really long, really impactful offensive player. He's explosive. He can shoot really, really well. Not saying that he's not a great player or up to that ilk of Kam Mercer or Josh Tyson, but yeah, he's a really good player.
I think the one thing that I've run into here over the last week or so since Kam has committed is talking to people about him, from a fan's perspective.
Yeah.
Trying to get an idea of what kind of a player he is, and we're going to get into that with you because you've seen the EYBL circuit, and I'm excited to hear kind of how he's developed in that area. But in general, high school recruiting has really taken a back seat.
Yeah.
I'm not saying specifically at Cincinnati. I'm just saying in general with the sport. Anybody that follows the sport knows that this has become college sports have become a transfer portal sport, and especially college basketball, where high school recruits are getting pushed out, and they might get pushed out even more here in the next few weeks if that 5-and-5 rule gets passed. And you start to see some of these older players get an extra year of eligibility, next season. It doesn't sound like those players are going to be grandfathered in from this year.
Yeah.
But next season, these seniors that could then get another year, it's like, where does the high school recruiting fit in? Well, a player of Kam's talent certainly finds a place on a roster, and he's a guy that can impact this team day one.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the more attractive things about Cincinnati because, Jerrod Calhoun plays freshmen. Like, he brings them in and he plays them. Elijah Perryman, big contributor for them last year, kind of saw his minutes cut as the rotation shortened at the end of the year, but averaged 4 points, a lot of assists. Adlin Elamian, who's basically an NBA prospect now, averaged, I think, 6.7 points, great rebounder, really good length. He was a true freshman out of Virginia. So that is one of the more intriguing things about Cincinnati, in that if you're a freshman and you can compete, you're going to come in and you're going to get minutes. And that isn't the same for a lot of programs. So that automatically launches Cincinnati into like another 10 to 15 prospects who they might not have been able to get because they can promise minutes as true freshmen. Now, like the Dukes and the Arizonas and the Kentuckys they're going to get the top 5 guys who are going to be one and dones.
Yeah.
But that interesting kind of 20 to 35 ranked guys, kind of similar to Ashana Bayev, who came in last year, they should get opportunities to play if they wanted to come to Cincinnati. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic there.
So let's talk about Kam specifically and what he will bring to this team.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of a player is he? Because he had a pretty phenomenal year last year.
Mm-hmm.
Haven't heard a ton about him on the EYBL circuit this year. Why is that?
Well, he doesn't shoot the ball a ton. Like, when I went down and watched him in Cartersville, it was the first time I'd seen him this summer. And I had kind of watched him sparingly the past few years because I remember Mick Walker, who does a good job covering Ohio State for On3, he DM'd me on Twitter one morning 2 summers ago. He goes, "He's checking out Kam Mercer?" I'm like, "Who is this?" And then I look him up, and he's this 8th grader playing up 2 years on the EYBL circuit from Winton Woods. And I was like, okay, I guess I should kind of follow this kid. But this is the first summer I've really gotten to sit down and watch his game. He does not force anything. He literally told me after Cartersville when I talked to him, he said, yeah, it's kind of my fatal flaw that coaches get on to me about. Like, they want me to shoot the ball more and they want me to get more involved in the offense. He really emphasizes getting the best shot for his team. If that's him, if that's a teammate, that's fine. And he plays a tough brand of defense because when you think about those really young guys who you're kind of forecasting them down the road and they're a 5-star, you think he's going to be this guy who doesn't really have a high motor and just wants to get his on the offensive end. This kid competes. And I always bring it back to a Mick Cronin quote where he just had this random presser in a mid-season presser like before practice in a scrum. And he was asked about competing for 5-star guys or really highly rated 4-star guys. He goes, yeah, we try, but I just want guys who impact winning. And Kam Mercer is that kind of guy. He competes on the offensive end. He does all the dirty work. He rebounds for a guard. So I think he's going to come in and be able to make an impact very, very quickly. So defensively, just talk a little bit more about that side of the ball too. Yeah, really long. He moves laterally really, really well, and he's very fast. I feel like the majority of the shots he took were off of steals in transition and then just getting dunks at the rim. So he loves doing that. But I think his length is going to be one of the bigger things, and obviously he's freakishly athletic. Sure. All right, let's get into the roster this year. What Jerrod Calhoun has done in the portal, what UC fans can expect going into next season. Had to reset everything. Yeah. Had to do a complete reset on the roster. And it's funny looking at what Jerrod Calhoun had to do this year and what Richard Pitino at Xavier had to do last year. It feels very similar in that you bring a new coach. And this goes for any new hire around. It's not rocket science. New coach comes in, players with this freedom of movement, they're going to leave, they're going to go somewhere else, and now you have to completely replace them. Overall, the job that you think that he has done here at Cincinnati, number 4 ranked portal class in the Big 12, according to 247, number 21 overall. Mm-hmm. So he's clearly done a very good job. What have been your impressions of what Jerrod Calhoun's done in the portal? Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know the exact algorithm or formula they use for how they rank those classes, because it's like if you bring in 13 guys and they're highly rated, is it just the amount of guys you bring in at a certain rate? Quality and quantity. Yes. Yeah. So I don't know what the formula is there, but I think there's not a lot of quote-unquote sexy names on this list. Maybe you could see Miles Colvin say he played in a Sweet 16 with Purdue, highly rated out of Indiana a couple years ago. But there's a lot of guys who it's like, okay, you see the vision that Calhoun had. But when I talked to him in Memphis, one of the first things he said was, Keegan, I think we're going to be a lot better than people think. And you start to see the length that he brought in and how guys fit in the system. Like, they missed on Drew McKeever, who ended up going to Iowa. But I think Jaden Hastings might fit the kind of formula that they were trying to put together better than McKeever. And I love that people are comparing Hastings to Justin Jackson, because he was one of my favorite players ever. Just a guy who plays with his hair on fire and just tries to block a bunch of shots. So, I mean, they started getting all the additions, and it's like, okay, Tyler Tejada, great, 17 points at Towson. He should come in and give you 13 or 14 as a wing who can shoot the three. But the piece was missing of who's going to run the offense, like who's going to be the lead guard. So when it came down to Tylen Riley, when you're looking at that, okay, he's committing this day, who else is left in the portal if you don't get him? So they kind of threw all their chips in, and they're able to get a guy who gets to the line a ton.
But I mean, hey, look, another team that we cover on this show, Kentucky, they put their chips in the middle of the table for a high school guy, Tyron Stokes, and that didn't work out. So it is nice when you push your chips into the middle of the table and you get the guy, because Tylen Riley is a dynamic, game-changing, playmaking type guy who will completely alter what this team would have been without him and now what they will be with him.
Yeah, but, I mean, do you want your 1 and 2 to be Talon Kinney and Tyron Stokes at Kansas? I don't know if I do. Yeah, that seems like it can go awry pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, Riley's a great player, and I love the amount of guards they brought in that shot 80% from the free throw line.
Yeah.
Now that's something UC fans are going to have to get used to.
a good free throw
making their free throws. Are you kidding me? You have Sean Abayev come in and he's shooting like 50% from the line through 15 games. And it's like, what? I think they're actually cursed. But that is going to be a big part of their offense. And that's one of my biggest gripes with Wes Miller last year is he had Day Thomas, who made 90% of his free throws, and he averaged like 1.5 free throws a game.
Yeah.
It's like, get downhill, get to the line, and make that be a part of your offense. That just wasn't something that I thought Wes ever wanted to be a part of his offense. And my boss, Chad Brendel, told me a quote that Bob Knight said. He wanted to make more free throws than his opponent took in a given game.
Yeah.
Like, that's the identity of the offense that you want. And I think they're going to be closer to that with Jerrod Calhoun compared to Wes Miller.
I mean, sitting here looking at this, I had this stat in my head, but I had to go back and like make sure.
It's just a bunch of red on Ken Pom.
It is insane. UC as a team has not shot 71% or better from the free throw line as a team for the season since 2006. Andy Kennedy.
Yeah.
Shout out Andy Kennedy.
Yeah, Mick Cronin, John Brandon, and Wes Miller are not free throw merchants.
2020 years. Yeah. And like 71% is, we're not talking like this
that's not
unattainable
good.
number. We're not talking like, oh, they shot, 85% from the field. They were the best free throw shooting team in the country, and this is some unattainable number. 71% for a good power conference team is not that much to ask for, and they haven't done it in 2 decades.
Yeah, and it's one of the most frustrating things because whenever they're struggling at the free throw line, I get people flooding my mentions saying, ask about free throws. Why aren't you asking about free throws? And every coach, when you ask about free throws, says the same thing. It's like, yeah, we're trying to make them. We practice them. I don't know what you want me to do. I'm not game planning how to make free throws. If they can start making their free throws, like if they can make what's a good number? 78%?
Yeah, it's upper 70s.
National champions.
Yeah, oh, there it is.
That's what I'm getting to at this point.
Clip it. All right, we'll get into here some of the nitty-gritty of the roster, some of these transfers individually. You mentioned Tyler Tejada. That's a name that I've talked about a lot on this show because on my CBS Sports Network broadcast this year in the CAA, I had a chance to watch Tyler a lot. I had a chance to talk to Pat Scarry about him, his head coach at Towson, a lot. And I think one thing that I kept coming back to when I was watching Tyler was, for as athletic as he was and for as talented just skills from a skill set perspective, as talented as he was, it felt like I kept wanting Tyler to reach another gear of just grittiness, of just kind of being a tougher player and somebody that I felt like had another level to him that he could unlock if he, I don't want to say tried harder. That sounds very juvenile to just say if he just tried harder. But to an extent, I mean, it was true. There were times in the games that I would watch where I would sit there and I'd think to myself, Keegan, man, there's another level there. Yeah. And if Jerrod Calhoun can get that out of him, he could be a really special player. Yeah,
it's kind of the similar archetype of a Shanabayev. Of you watch the film and it's like, okay, he's just really good offensively. Like, that's what he's going to come here to do. Is he's going to try to score a bunch of points, get that kind of Dirk Nowitzki fadeaway going that he does. But yeah, the same thing came off to me in film of doesn't have the highest motor defensively. But he's going to be able to create for himself and make some plays. And if he can step out and get that 29% three-point rate up to maybe 35, 36, that'll make a huge difference.
You had mentioned Miles Colvin. He's a player that had been at Purdue, played the national championship game against UConn a couple of years ago, transfers to Wake Forest. And there were some times at Wake Forest when you would watch Miles where he would let one problem compound into 5 or 6 problems in a row. And that's where you would have these just kind of pull your hair out moments from him. But on the flip side, when he was really at his best, he's another dynamic, game-changing type player that UC brings in.
Yeah, and that's exactly – I talked to Cam Lemons-Daybro from Wake Forest 247 site, and he said, you knew what kind of offensive night Miles Colvin was going to have in the first 2 minutes. Like, if that first shot went in, he was probably going to have a good night. And if it didn't, then he could miss 7 threes and score 5 points. The thing about him at Cincinnati is I think the role that he will play makes more sense for his skill set because he was at Wake Forest and they had some injuries, and all of a sudden Miles Colvin is like one of their most important players. And if he's not averaging 16, 17 points a game, they're struggling. And you saw, I mean, what is it, 6 years for Steve Forbes that hasn't made a tournament?
Yeah.
I think he got a 6th or 7th year. Yeah. So I was like, are they going to keep Wes Miller after seeing that? Yeah. But I think, come here, and then you have Tylen Riley, you have Tyler Tejada, all these guys who are going to have more of an offensive usage rate, I guess you could say, over Miles Colvin. He can just set up and play some 3-and-D, get to that corner shot that he loves so much, and have success.
Riley Allensbach, the transfer from George Mason. We'll kind of go through this here from the interior. Allensbach, Jaden Hastings, a couple of the taller, more imposing figures that Jerrod Calhoun brings in. The interior is where I'm going to have my biggest question mark for this season, and it's something that I'm interested in. I think they have a couple of spots left on this roster that I'll be interested to see if they want to address some of that here. But you get Allensbach and Hastings. We'll start with Riley. 6'11", 250 from George Mason, started all 32 games that he played in this year for the Patriots. About 25 minutes a game, but somebody, again, that can impact the game in the post.
Yeah, and it's another big from George Mason, so hopefully this one can stay healthy through the summer.
Hopefully this one just gets on the court.
Yeah, they were a Jalen Haynes away from making the tournament last year. You could easily say that. So, but, I don't know if you go with him as your number one big into the season when he was kind of the only one, and along to David Awize, who we'll talk about. A lot of fans were nervous. It was like, is this not a lot of rim protection? The rebounding numbers aren't that impressive, but I think you can rely on him for a lot of offensive production. And something that UC hasn't had because of Haynes' injury is just a back to the basket guy who can kind of get it done. No offense to Mustafa Cham and his mid-range, who he released it here, which it was really effective, and it got him paid at Michigan. So, but Allensbach was a good first get for them to kind of set it up in the interior.
Yeah, and then Jaden Hastings, another one as well.
Yeah, got him over Texas Tech. Eat your heart out, Brendan Sorsby. So I think that was a great get. Anyone who can put up those rim protection numbers in the ACC, that's someone you want. And we talked about the Justin Jackson comparisons. Might not play as crazy as Jackson did, and I think he might be a little taller. But I think rim protection is something that they needed, and he can bring it in. And also, he's a lob threat offensively, so he's not a slack there either.
Let's go here through the 3 Utah State transfers.
Yeah.
You bring in Adlin Elamine, Elijah Perryman, David Oweze, underclassmen, but guys that you bring over from Utah State. And I think one of the big things that we talk about in the portal a lot is continuity and players that have played for your head coach's system, that have been in the system before. And whether they've played a lot in the system, Oweze redshirted, Perryman started one game, played in 36, Elamine played in 35, started 28. So there is a lot of familiarity there with Jerrod Calhoun, which one will help on the court with production, but also, you go into a timeout, you go into practice. You need some sort of continuity. You need something to bring over, and he brings 3 guys over from Utah State. Do you have any early impressions of those 3?
Yeah, I think Elijah Perryman could be a guy who could be running the offense after this first Calhoun season. From what I've heard is he might be the best passer on the roster, and you see that with the assist numbers. I think he averaged 4 assists in kind of a short timeshare on the court, which is really impressive. Very long, so that'll help him on the defensive end. Because I was kind of thinking, I kind of preferred Keyshawn Tillery, and I was hoping that they would be able to bring him back, but he ended up at Charlotte with Wes Miller. So I've kind of been sold on Perryman as a really good passer who has length and has that kind of maybe a higher ceiling than Keyshawn. And then, we're going to talk Adlin Elamine, lengthy NBA prospect. And I know I've used that term a lot for UC guys who haven't ended up making it to the NBA in the past. Dan Skillings. But I think Elamine is a really, really intriguing guy, and he's proof of their ability to identify talent because he wasn't even a top 100 guy in Virginia, and just in the state. Yeah. And they were able to bring him in and turn him into a good player.
Yeah. And then Eric Mahaffey, local product, went to Moeller, goes up to Akron to start his career, plays on an Akron team that went to the NCAA tournament this year, played in 34 games, started 11 of them. So some experience up there for John Gross, but comes back home and goes to Cincinnati.
Yeah, and I like bringing in guys that have played for winning coaches who are on a good trajectory, have played in the NCAA tournament. Don't be surprised if he's a guy who he could possibly be starting on that first game, especially if he can. I think he made 39%, maybe even 40% from 3 last year as a redshirt freshman. So I think him and Miles Colvin kind of fighting for that 2-guard spot is going to be really interesting. And then we'll talk about Akai Fleming, but he's also a guy that could be involved in that competition.
Just go ahead right now. Just take it.
Yeah, that was a shocker, and they kept it under wraps, and I think it all happened in maybe a day of Georgia Tech guard Akai Fleming, average double figures as a true freshman in the ACC. A guy who has a high ceiling, good offensive archetype. So I think he was maybe one of the bigger wins in getting him so late in the process. And maybe if they had not gotten Tylen Riley and gotten Akai Fleming, we could be talking about him as someone who could possibly lead the offense. But the good thing is you don't have to push him into a role that he might not be ready for.
Mm-hmm. And then the last player we haven't talked about, Travion Carson, the senior from North Dakota State. 35 games, 34 starts this year at North Dakota State. The only thing that I would kind of question about that one is the competition level at North Dakota State. You're trying to hope that he translates up to the Big 12 level. But at the same time, in the same breath, a few of these guys you're hoping translate up to the Big 12 level. So you could say that for one. You could say that for a handful of them. But at the same time, Travion Carson, 32 minutes a game at North Dakota State. So that's what I like out of a player like him because he's playing a lot. It's not like you're taking the sixth man that's like, all right, we're just going to take a flyer here, whatever. Mm-hmm. Hey, somebody that has played a lot, seen a lot of minutes, and seen some pretty important minutes at North Dakota State.
Yeah, Jeff Goodman had a tweet where he kind of reached out to a coach in his conference, and the coach said he might be the best all-around guard in the entire conference. Yeah. And it's kind of similar to what I talked about with Kam Mercer and Josh Tyson. He's not elite at anything, but he's good at everything. There aren't a lot of deficiencies. I think his rebounding numbers are even pretty well for a 6'3" guard.
Yeah.
So I think he was a really, really important get, and you look at him as that
6.5 rebounds.
Yeah. You look at him as that glue guy who can come in and kind of do the dirty work.
Yeah. Okay. So we've hit on all the players here that right now are committed to Cincinnati.
Yeah.
What do you think they still have left to do, if anything?
Maybe add another big. I know Corey Evans has a lot of connections overseas. They brought in Lucas Atari and Jordy Rodriguez last year over the summer. I think that they landed both of them in like the same week in July. But I think at this point you add depth. I don't know if you're going to add a like insert into the lineup kind of guy. A guy we didn't touch on, David Oweezy. Long redshirt freshman who came over, and I think that's kind of the biggest question mark. If he can have a good season, that kind of changes your perspective on the interior. But I wouldn't blame Calhoun or Corey Evans if they wanted to go overseas and get another big and just get some more size in there.
Sure. So, but for the most part, the roster is coming to
it's pretty close. Anything else would probably be just a complimentary addition that is a perfect fit, basically.
Sure.
I would say.
And looking at the guys that have left, Jalen Haynes went to Dayton, Jizzle James went to Charlotte. 4 players from this past year's team follow Wes Miller to Charlotte.
Yeah, I mean, someone asked me if that surprised me, and it does not surprise me whatsoever. There's a lot of gripes against Wes Miller for how he coached and kind of the inability to produce a consistent offense. If there's one thing that's true about that guy, players love playing for him. You can come back to after my first year here, they go into the offseason, and I mean, Bill Self is basically recruiting Dan Skillings in the handshake line after that game in Lawrence. And it's like all these guys could have left for more money. Like Houston came after Jizzle James. They all came back because they love playing for Wes Miller. He was able to take care of them financially, but he definitely didn't pay all of them what they could have made somewhere else. And that's one of the more disappointing things is the amount of continuity you had for that season with Skillings, with Jizzle, with Seamouse Lukosius. You had Aziz Bendago, Jameel Reynolds, and you couldn't accomplish anything or even get to the tournament.
Yeah.
So he's a player's coach. His players love playing for him, especially Jizzle James with the whole kind of suspension thing last year. They're really, really tight. And I'm kind of looking forward to watching them compete because I think they'll be able to have a pretty good team next year.
All right, let's talk big picture now, Keegan, on this team. Let's talk like floor, ceiling, expectations, what you can realistically expect out of this group. And I think something that stuck out to me that you said earlier is when you were talking to Jerrod Calhoun in Memphis on the recruiting trail, and he told you that he thinks that this Cincinnati team is going to be better than people are giving them credit for, that maybe this team has some things to prove that we haven't heard about yet or that are flying under the radar. In general, before we get into floor and ceiling, what would you say your expectations should be for this team?
I mean, making the tournament would make everyone happy, and I think you have no excuse to not make a tournament in a 76-team field at Cincinnati, and especially with the amount of financial support that you're getting for a roster. I mean, it's well documented that Cincinnati is spending more on basketball than a lot of other schools that would do the typical like 75% football, 20% basketball, 5% to all the non-revenue generating sports. So that kind of split is favoring basketball a little bit. And that's one of the biggest gripes against Wes Miller because you like go along the market share of what he was paying each player.
Yeah.
That was a $11 to $12 million roster last season. And you can't get into a tournament. So I think if the expectation isn't to make the tournament year in and year out, give the money to football and see what they can do with it, especially if you're at Cincinnati, which a lot of people would still consider a basketball school. And that would be my expectation, but I don't think it's a thing where they sneak in. I think that they have a deep enough roster with enough experience and enough winning on the roster. And now you have a good enough coach that would be able to handle those kind of close games in the Big 12. And that's one thing I always tell everyone. Like, I think we made it we're overblowing how difficult it is to make the tournament. Because Wes Miller, they were trailing like 34-3 to Clemson and then lost by 2.
Yeah.
You lose to Eastern Michigan at home. You lose to a Xavier team who was struggling last year in year one and didn't have as good of roster because you didn't practice double teaming in the post.
Yeah.
So Trey Carroll
scores 30.
He scored 60 points.
Yeah.
So there were just way too many opportunities. You blew a 15-point lead at home to West Virginia late in the year. And then you go on this diatribe after the game about how you're by the way, I don't like this. I'm angry too. So there were way too many opportunities.
Really.
Yes. He's pissed off. And then he's fired up when he goes to Charlotte.
Yeah.
There were way too many opportunities that were right there in his hands to capitalize. Didn't even talk about the UCF debacle in the Big 12 tournament, which probably would have gotten them in the NCAA tournament. So you're that game being blown away from Wes Miller still being the coach here.
Yeah.
Jerrod Calhoun, I want to go to Kansas State. Maybe Pitt makes a different decision. Who knows? But I think they should be in a good position to not sneak into the tournament and kind of get a decent seed.
One thing that I'm very interested in, just in general, this is not a UC thing, but as it relates to this past year with UC is, and we've talked about this on a couple of old episodes of the Rundown from a month ago, now that the tournament has expanded and gone to 76, I'm wondering if making the tournament as the 76th, the last team in, we'll call it, the last team in, and you hear your name on Sunday night, Tuesday afternoon or late afternoon, whenever they play the first game. Let's say Cincinnati makes the tournament. Mm-hmm. They play the first game on Tuesday afternoon, wherever that game is, and they lose. Is that enough to save Wes Miller's job? Is just being – this is all hypothetical, obviously, but I think this is going to play out.
Yeah.
Maybe not every year, but there will be coaches that are right on the cut line of, are we going to bring him back or are we going to not? And then he can go into his AD's office and say, well, you told me to make the tournament, and I made the tournament. Now, we bowed out less than 48 hours later in an afternoon with 4,000 people in the stands in some random city wherever they decide to play these new play-in games. But I guess that's my question for a lot of these coaches is just now that they're making a 76-team field, which is ridiculous, but it is what it is that enough to save your job?
I think it might give a given coach an extra year. Yeah. Like if it was 76 teams this past year and Wes Miller made it into the tournament and lost the first game, I would say probably would have kept his job because UC isn't really in a financial position like a school like Kentucky, Ohio State, Texas A&M. It's where they just have money to blow on buyouts.
Yeah.
Like that.
Well, because it's not just the buyout. It's that you got to buy the coach out.
Yeah.
Then you got to hire the new coach. Yeah. Then you got to pay the assistants. Then the assistants that are going away.
Yeah.
And also you have to pay a new roster. So it's not just, we're going to, change the coach out, like the old days where it's you change the coach out, hopefully some of the roster is retained or most of the roster is retained, and you're not paying those players anyway. Really all you're worrying about are the buyouts.
Yeah.
You also have to turn over a roster. You're talking about like a $30 million investment in a coaching change now, where that was not the case, a few years ago.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it with Wake Forest, but Steve Forbes is now like year 6 or 7 without making a tournament in a row. So, like, there are certain schools who they're just not going to be in a financial position to fire a coach, especially given the fact that they make a tournament. That's a great excuse. And, the thing that I've learned about college athletics so much is it's how you spin it PR-wise. You can spin a tournament appearance PR-wise to bring a coach back very easily. But you could not spin 5 years without a tournament for Wes Miller to bring him back for this 6th year. So that's kind of the rub that these schools are in.
Yeah. All right, let's talk floor and ceiling here for Cincinnati. Let's say floor. If everything goes wrong, and things don't really work out, maybe in the Big 12, things get difficult, the roster doesn't mesh as well as they were hoping.
Yeah.
Where do you see this season, if it goes as badly as it could, what would that floor be for this team?
I think it's probably 10-10 in the Big 12. And are they still in 20 games or are they back to 18?
They may. Is this year they go back to 18?
I think they might be going back to 18. Yeah. It's that 500 mark in the Big 12 is what I'll say. And then the ceiling, if everything goes right, would be you get to 13-7 in the Big 12.
It is 18 games.
Okay, so 9-9, maybe 8-10 kind of thing. But I just think you can copy and paste just how well his offense has flowed, and that should give this team a good chance to have success. And then making free throws, something that you can control, and then kind of just going after the trail guy on defense of that fist offense that you talked about with Eric Houghton and NKU, where they kind of founded it. I think that they have all the pieces to be able to be a really good team.
So a ceiling, what would you give a ceiling to this team? Like if everything goes right, they perform really well, where do you see this team?
Probably to the ceiling would probably be to a Sweet 16, I would say. I don't think that they're going to have the firepower to kind of beat those top 5 teams who just have more size, especially when you look at what Arizona did, like Michigan with Yaxel Lindenberg and Ade Mara. Like there are still schools out there that have those guys that'll go and get 22 points a game and be 7 foot tall. And UC just doesn't have that. And that was one of the biggest reasons why he came to Cincinnati. And it was like, you can invest in size at schools like Arizona because you just saw the dichotomy between those two schools in the round of 32. But I think given his track record, given how close he was to getting there at Utah State, when you have more talent and you bring in your system, I think you should be able to have enough success to get to a Sweet 16.
What would be something that you would say fans haven't heard a lot about right now, and it'll be, something that they can expect to see that's like, oh, this is kind of flying under the radar, whether it's a player or a style, and anything that's maybe you haven't heard a lot about that you're sitting there thinking, man, I've heard a lot about this behind the scenes.
Yeah. They actually just brought in a guy from Mount Union with Mike Feuline. I think his name's Deshaun Vaden. And everything I've heard is that he's either going to be the greatest story of Cincinnati basketball or just kind of be a guy who is buried on the roster or might just impact on practice. Because I think he had like 129 blocks last year from Mount Union, just an athletic freak. That's more of a boom or bust kind of guy. The actual guy who I think people should be talking about is David Aweezy, a redshirt freshman coming over, spent his true freshman season at Utah State, and then obviously Calhoun sees enough in him to bring him to Cincinnati and thinks that he can compete in the Big 12. And if he can be that really talented offensive player with his length, he can make a huge difference.
When you talk about a guy like Deshaun Vaden, the nice thing now about college basketball with the expansion of the roster and everything, and you have spots for guys like that, you can take a flyer on a player where you're saying, okay, if it works out, great. If he doesn't see a minute, who cares? He's on the practice side and he's just helping everybody else get better. Who cares?
Yeah.
But a boom or a bust is very easy to do in today's landscape.
Yeah, and you see those guys all the time in the past that you don't really think that they're going to have that big of an impact, and then they're one of your best players. Like, I don't know if I expected Baba Miller to be what he was last year, like how impactful he was on both sides of the ball. Mustafa Cham, one of the better players in the country. So those players are super, super important. And then when you pair them with a good coach like Calhoun, who can kind of bring it out in them, and he's comfortable with his former head coach, Mike Feuline, now at UC, I think there's a lot of opportunity for him.
All right, last thing here, and we'll do this pretty quickly because if you're watching this on Fox 19, then I don't know when this is going to air on Fox 19, so the season may or may not be over by the time this is airing. But there are people that are going to be listening to this and watching this on YouTube this week, and we're recording this on May 26th before UC has played in the Hattiesburg Regional for Starkville.
Yeah, the other town in Mississippi. You said Hattiesburg.
Hattiesburg, the other town in Mississippi, correct. Yeah, wrong. Mississippi State, wrong town, correct. Just in general, the job that Jordan Bischel has done at Cincinnati has obviously been very impressive, a team that's competing at the national level this year. What are your expectations going into this weekend?
Yeah, I think they should be able to make a deep run and they should have a chance to get out of this regional. I think that they have a good matchup. They're the, 19 overall seed going up against the 14 overall seed who's hosting the regional, so they got a pretty favorable matchup. They match up good with Louisiana, Lipscomb, and then you have the power guys of Quentin Coates, who I think had 26 home runs this season, broke the UC record. Jack Natili is going to be a draft pick. Nate Taylor going to be a draft pick, their starter. So they lost their two best players after last season in Carrington Cross and Landon Vidrick, but they're just so much better this year somehow. And you have to point to the coach to be able to develop that roster. So I think that they should be in good shape.
Jordan Bischel's done a phenomenal job in his first few seasons here in Cincinnati. What's been most impressive to you about what he's been able to do?
I think just how much his players love playing for him and how, I don't want to say easygoing because I'm not there behind the scenes a lot, but it doesn't look like he gets pressed about too much. And I think he seems like a coach who it's really easy to play for him.
Yeah.
And that's why he's able to get some guys out of the portal, and he's able to fend off some bigger guys with deeper pockets from coming and snatching his players. So I think just how upstanding of a guy he is and how great of a personality he has, and he hasn't let kind of working at a bigger school change him in any way.
Are you going down to Starkville?
I am leaving Friday morning.
Oh.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
You been there before?
I have not. I went to Tennessee last year, and that was one of the cooler things I've ever done in my career. And all I've heard is that Mississippi State is cooler than Tennessee in terms of a baseball environment. So I'm very excited.
The SEC baseball is crazy.
Yes.
SEC. Yeah. I forget. So when I was in the minor leagues in 2021, there was a player on the team that had played in the SEC. Mm-hmm. I was broadcasting. I was not playing. Let's be very clear.
He's humming 96 from the left side.
But there was a player who had played in the SEC on the team that I was covering. And I was talking to him one time about, what it was like to pitch in the SEC. And he was telling me that he got married either his senior year, it was like right when he was out. But he was telling me how he couldn't let the location of where he was getting married leak because too many people were trying to show up, or it was becoming such a big deal.
Yeah,
I was like,
I would highly recommend going down for like a Friday night Tennessee versus Vanderbilt game in Knoxville. It would be an awesome atmosphere. Yeah.
I did go to Vanderbilt. I have been to a Vanderbilt game.
Okay,
that's
gotcha.
The Whistler. What are we doing, man? What are we doing?
I don't even know. I just know the Barstool Yak beef with them and Mincy.
What are we doing? All right, we've gone on long enough here. Keegan, I appreciate you coming on. Anything else here on Cincinnati, or any kind of closing thoughts on Jerrod Calhoun or this staff? I guess that's my last question here. Anything on the staff outside of Jerrod Calhoun that's impressed you here over the first month and a half?
Yeah, I think how he's surrounding himself with certain individuals is pretty impressive. And I've heard a lot about his chief of staff, Paul Molinari. I've heard about Mike Feuline coming over from Mount Union. So kind of the willingness to just bring in people who he thinks can impact it, not just names, I think it is really big. And also being able to bring a lot of his staff over from Utah State.
Well, Max Spence got everybody up and
oh my gosh,
riled up with the GIFs.
We talked to that kid during the marathon stream for 513 Day. He's going to be a head coach at some point, I'm telling you. And this is a kid who he played tennis in high school and just wanted like a basketball internship at Michigan. And he worked under John Beilein. And now
not a bad way to do it.
Not a bad way to do it at all. Now he's under Jerrod Calhoun, and he's super young. So Max Bent, high major D1 head coach in 5 to 10 years.
There it is.
Yeah.
Mark it down. Clip that one too. All right. Well, I appreciate all of you watching and listening. Keegan, thank you very much for being here today.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you making a trip down here to the studio, an in-studio show. And again, make sure if you enjoyed watching this or listening to this, you subscribe wherever you're listening or watching to this right now. And then also make sure you follow us on social media at Rebound Rundown. We have you covered for all of the local teams all off season long. Starting to put together the list of some of the coaches that we're going to be talking to here. We did a kind of a off-season coaches tour last year. Starting to put that list together for this off-season as well. Have some fun names. That'll be coming up later in the summer as well, so just something to keep an eye on. But make sure you subscribe, follow us, and we'll talk to you next week on the Rebound Rundown. Thanks for listening, everybody.